protesters at the villages in Florida.
There you go, white power.
Clearly shouting white power, the video remained on the president's feed for 3 hours because he was clearly shouting.
There you go.
In Florida. Clearly shouting white power, the video remained on the president's feed for 3 hours because he was out golfing and his aides couldn't reach him to try to take it down. NBC News White House correspondent Kristen Welker was part of the team that broke the story and joins us now. Kristen, that tweet, just another, one of a number of controversial tweets that have aroused concerns even among the president's own staff.
It's disgusting. It's humiliating.
That's right, and this is from my colleague Carol Lee and I, who are told by multiple officials here that tweet did set off a 5-alarm fire. Officials here immediately trying to contact the president, as well as Dan Scavino, who of course is one of the officials who has control of the president's Twitter feed. They had a tough time trying to get in touch with him, but the urgency was really added when the president's ally, Senator Tim Scott, went on national TV and condemned the tweet and called on the president to take it down. So ultimately they were able to take it down. But you're right, Andrea, this does come against the backdrop of other incendiary tweets that the president has sent out. Now the White House saying, look, the president didn't hear that apparent supporter shouting white power. But if you go back, President Trump was asked about a controversial tweet several months ago when he retweeted something that said #Fire Fauci, a reference to Dr. Anthony Fauci, and the president was asked if he noticed that. The president said, quote, "I notice everything." So a number of his critics saying it strains credulity that he wouldn't be able to hear what was in that video. I've been talking to aides and allies in and out of the White House, Andrea, and they say coming against the backdrop of this tough re-election campaign, he can't afford missteps like this moving forward. Andrea.
Thanks so much, Kristen Welker, on top of everything at the White House. And joining me now is Dr. Cameron Webb, the Democratic candidate for Congress in Virginia. He was a White House fellow in the Obama administration, serving on the White House healthcare team, and continued his fellowship into the Trump administration. Good to see you. Thank you very much, Dr. Webb. Apparently, once the Trump team took over, your desk was moved into a hallway and eventually taken away. Tell me what happened.
Well, that's right. So thanks for having me, Andrea. And, I was in the White House from 2016 into 2017. And my very first day when I arrived, all of my belongings had been moved out of my office. And when I asked where I sit now, they had moved my desk into a hallway in the executive office building. They kept the door to the Office of Cabinet Affairs always closed. They told me they were dealing with sensitive matters. And despite my top secret clearance, they didn't want me helping out. So that was kind of my welcome to the Trump administration back in 2017.
Did that in any way just inspire you to want to run for office?
That didn't inspire my desire to run. Actually, what happened is, in the months that followed, I spent a lot of time just wandering around the executive office building because they didn't allow me to work on anything. And I was connecting with other folks in the Trump White House. I would ask them questions about why they were believing the way they did on issues of policy and education or healthcare or criminal justice reform. And I got to know some of the folks who were doing the policy work. We got to have real conversations. And I think that's such a critical part of our national dialogue right now. We have to be able to have conversations with people we disagree with strongly and still be able to finish the conversation and move forward. And so I really fine-tuned that skill walking through the halls of the executive office building because my desk was in the hallway.
And as a medical doctor, and you're from Charlottesville, you're now set up to run against Congressman Good, who describes himself as a biblical conservative. But you've been very critical of the president's actions on the pandemic, not modeling the wearing of masks, for instance.
Absolutely. And And I want to first not give Mr. Good the label of congressman quite yet. It's an open seat, so it's an exciting opportunity. But I think just the same, whether no matter how you label your conservatism, I think in this instance, a lot of the actions when it comes to this pandemic have just been unacceptable. I think that we just haven't had, in a lot of ways, we haven't had the response on the front end. We haven't had the pandemic preparedness on the front end. And then even as we've seen it roll out, I would say there's an infodemic. The information coming out of the Trump administration has just been off base. It's the reason why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing in Arizona and Texas and Florida. And I think that it's much harder to pull back after you've given such strong signals to folks to charge forward. There are lives on the line. And I spent the last 4 days working in the hospital. I'm seeing this up close and personal. This isn't something to play around with. I think it's an important time to get this right. And it's apparent to me that the president doesn't have the temperament or the insight to get this right.
Are you shocked by him retweeting this racist white power tweet?
I'm not shocked. I'll actually tell you a story, Andrea. For me, my very last day in the White House was August 12th, 2017. So it was right after the Unite the Right rally. I came back into the office. I was supposed to continue working for a couple more weeks, and I was just absolutely incensed about his comments about good people or blame on both sides. His tone deafness. I think he's shown that throughout. He really effectively throws his dog whistles out there. These aren't mistakes, right? And he can walk it back however he wants. But I think that he's pretty deliberate about signaling to people what he supports. And in a time like this, where our nation is absolutely dead set on finding a path forward, on unity, on us coming together, and you're seeing this in communities all over the country, this is a time where that kind of messaging just isn't going to work. So he's trying to rally the people that message resonates with, but it's going to fall short in November. And so, I'm not surprised. I just believe that the American people right now are not willing to tolerate it.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. That's such an interesting race in the 5th District in Virginia. Thanks again. And that does it for us for this edition of Andrea Mitchell Reports. Remember, follow the show online on Facebook and on Twitter at Mitchell Reports. Ayman Mohadeen picks up our coverage after a short break.
What's up, America? It's your boy Ice.
The state of Illinois did most of its financing in.
Try NoStitch.com. This offer is not available in stores. So call 1-800-219-3017.
To get back to normal faster. Carrie Sanders. Carrie, thank you very much. And up next, new reporting on when the White House knew about the Russian bounty on U.S. troops. A House Democrat briefed on the intelligence this morning, at least by the White House, will join us next.
The following is a car warranty.
Congressman Banks, would you support additional sanctions against Putin?
Well, absolutely. We should do more to push back against Russia's malign activities in Afghanistan. But President Trump has done just that. He's been very tough on Russia, unlike the weak posture of the Biden-Obama administration that did so much to turn a blind eye to Russia's malign activities, especially in Ukraine, but also elsewhere, where Russia's interests very much were misaligned with the United States. But let me be very clear. I served in Afghanistan during the time that these bounties were supposedly placed on the heads of our troops. And the fact that the New York Times, in partnership with a leaker, published details that makes it harder for our intelligence community to do their job and get to the facts of this matter is despicable. Someone should be held accountable for it. We have to look at this New York Times story for what it is. It's a hit piece on the president just prior to an election to rehash the Russian collusion hoax to try to damage President Trump, and it's nothing more.
We have
Brad Sherman, there are many people who feel that way, that the president is being struck by sort of the Empire Strikes Back within the government, and that when you have the Biden campaign just picking it up and running with it, and ads have already been cut, and we still don't have actual information, and it's not verified, are you going to demand additional information, report, maybe hearings, to get to the bottom of it?
This report is important. Whether it's 99% true or 39% true, it should have been raised with the president. It wasn't. The people around him knew he didn't want to hear this. And so he's offering a seat at the G8 to Putin, while his administration knows there's a substantial likelihood or substantial possibility that there are bounties on the heads of our soldiers, and at very minimum that that Russia's giving money to the Taliban. When they had a chance to impose sanctions on Russian sovereign debt purchases, prevent them from getting the loans they want, they used a national security waiver and refused to sanction Russia. So he's obsequious to Putin. He's inviting him to the G8, which is the highest level of diplomatic involvement the country can have. He's refusing to and using special waivers to avoid preventing them from borrowing money from American banks.
All right.
All while Jim says
So I'm going to have to run.
they're killing our people in Afghanistan. That's not me. That's Jim.
And let's be clear that there was, and the invitation to Russia to join the G, I don't think that invitation has been formalized. I know that he did talk about the possibility, but I think that has not been something that's finalized, and of course that will be up for discussion. Congressman, I thank you both for being here this afternoon, helping us think it through. Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, Dr. Fauci says the current surge is nothing if we don't get things under control. And with more mandates over masks, what could happen if you don't cover up? We'll tell you.
As a caricature artist, I appreciate what makes each person unique. That's why I like Liberty Mutual.
Safe drivers do save 40%
of the story, and when asked to confirm or...
You know, I've sat and analyzed this now for, I guess, give or take about 2 years, towards streamlining from national TV broadcasting. Every now and then I get local news, but ordinarily it's always national news. Streamlining, analyzing, dissecting. Basically, since Mr. Trump has become president, give or take about a year into his presidency is whenever I started this. And the best word that I have to try to characterize or analogize this is a freaking whirlwind. This has turned into a whirlwind of nothing but a hurricane, in the sense of one day it's this way, another day it's that way. One day we're going to build a wall, one day we're going to tear down the wall, one day we're going to legalize it, one day we're not going to legalize it. One day the president was guilty towards going up against the Ukrainians. The next day, yeah, he done something wrong, but it wasn't justifiable in impeachment. The next day, we're dealing with a pandemic crisis, and the president says, well, it would just go away. The next day, we've got over 125,000 deaths. One day, the president says this. The next day, the White House says this. One day, the president's for white power. The next day, the president's in denial about white power. This is total chaos on a level that I have never seen before. But what they're bringing into the picture now, pertaining to a president that knowed that another president from another country such as Russia was putting out contracts on American soldiers. And for this president to still be inviting President Putin to the G7 talks, and for this president not to have gone up against President Putin in regards towards President Putin putting out contracts on American soldiers, just validates how extremely uncertain that the patterns that have been laid in front of the American people have been so bizarre and so extreme that I think that it's caught the majority of us off guard to the point that even the believable stories are unbelievable because they're so unbelievable to begin with in their factor. It's like, how in the world would anybody believe that a president would be willing to allow for such behavior to happen to his own army, to his own people? And because the story is so unbelievable in the sense of the category that it's being presented in, it makes it abstract for the American people to wrap their heads around it to the point of believing that this is actually happening towards a part of the reality that we're living in today. And I mean, we go through one news cycle after another news cycle. One news cycle after another news cycle. And it keeps growing. It keeps evolving. It keeps mutating, kind of like a disease. Kind of like the pandemic disease. It keeps mutating, growing. You know, yesterday we wasn't going to wear no mask. Mask makes it worse. You only wear a mask unless you actually have the coronavirus. Now today, they have proven that we're all supposed to wear a mask. It's up, down, back, forth, yo-yoing in and out, so much to the point that it has become such of a toxic atmosphere. Such of a toxic atmosphere that if Donald J. Trump was to kick over with a natural forces such as the Bushes did pertaining to old age or a massive heart attack or whatever, basically becoming deceased, I truly believe the environment that has been created out of this administration, you would have people believing that it was a fake death, that it would be on the same level of Elvis Presley or some of the other well-known people that has suddenly disappeared, including Jesse James. But I truly believe that if the President of the United States, if they was to announce today that the President had a massive heart attack and he has become deceased, that probably over half the American people wouldn't believe it. They would say it is staged. That's the atmosphere that's been created out of this administration of uncertainty. Not being able to take people face value for what they're telling you is the gospel or is the truth. You talk about losing credibility status. I've never seen an administration, even during the Nixon administration, the Nixon administration maintained its credibility status throughout the Vietnam War up until the very, very last, whenever they was fixing to expose all the tape recordings, the secret tape recordings. And it wasn't until up until the very, very last, whenever Nixon decided, rather than go through such embarrassment for not only himself, but for his family and for his whole cabinet that he had put together, he decided that he would pull ranks and walk into the sunset like the Lone Ranger. And we basically never heard no more out of President Nixon. in the regards towards political affairs. This guy, on the other hand, Trump, unless he does pass away pertaining to becoming deceased, even after he's no longer president, he's still going to be trying to influence and dictate and dominate certain features of our political affairs. It's become spooky scary in regards towards taking the abnormal and trying to turn it into the normal. An atmosphere that has become toxic on every level, especially whenever you have a president that even remotely comes close to going along with another leader of another country that know about these type of events going on with our own military and basically turned a blinded eye to it. But if you'll compound the proof in the pudding towards what's been going on in this presidency, beginning at the first part of this year with the impeachment trials of the Ukrainians, one dot leads to another dot leads to another dot, and we're just not talking about inadequacies. We're talking about a president that is looking more and more in regards towards him butting up to a communist controlled country in regards of either attacking or allowing for his own people to be attacked and not doing nothing about it. I'm not a politician. Politics has never been my thing. I'm not for or against a lot of the laws of the land, because the laws of the land are created and destroyed based upon the will of the people. And the same laws today didn't apply to the laws 200 years ago, just like the laws 200 years ago does not apply to today. Even though some of the laws may still be on the law books, we know that it's no longer considered predominant or obvious that if you don't tie your horse to a post in town, you could possibly be fined. You know why? Because most people don't get around on a horse no more. They get around on an automobile. And even though that law may still be on the books, we know that predominantly it's disembarked upon. It's been abolished because we're no longer riding horses. But to watch how this is evolving from one day to another, mutating almost like a disease. The best analogy that I have to give, it's like a whirlwind. A whirlwind that sometimes gets a little less powerful or in some days, but then becomes mighty powerful in the other days. In other words, you don't never know in the direction that it's going to be going in. You don't never know how strong or weak it's going to be, because it's a whirlwind. It's abnormal. It's out of control. Please listen to the rest of this as we embark upon to another chapter in the Trump saga of what is going on the latter part of June in 2020, right before a major presidential election is fixing to be kicked off on.
Deny it, Bolton declined to comment. According to the New York Times, officials with knowledge of the matter say the president received a written briefing in February of this year. Again, the White House has insisted President Trump never received a briefing about the intel, and the veracity of the intel remains unclear. But the administration has also declined to say whether it was in the president's daily brief, the PDB, that highly classified document produced for the president and his top security advisors. Following a briefing at the White House this morning, House Democrats questioned why the president had failed to act on the information.
The president called this a hoax publicly. Nothing in the briefing that we have just received led me to believe it is a hoax. I find it inexplicable in light of these very public allegations that the president hasn't come before the country and assured the American people that he will get to the bottom of whether Russians are putting a bounty on the heads of American troops. I do not understand for a moment why the president isn't saying this to the American people right now and is relying on, I don't know, I haven't heard, I haven't been briefed.
Let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee. So Carol, much of this reporting comes from your sources there in the White House and beyond. A lot of heavy lifting on the term briefing. The White House is saying the president wasn't briefed. Are they saying it wasn't in the PDB? Are they saying that John Bolton, as the AP had reported, never said anything to the president, or he didn't even hear about it last year, as we've been reporting?
Katie, they're maintaining that the president was not aware of this plot by the Russians until essentially it came out in news reports. One official telling us that once it was out there in the news, then the president was, quote, brought up to speed. So that's their position. They're sticking to it. Now, a source person directly with direct knowledge of the intelligence on Russian bounties tells us that their White House and senior officials at the National Security Council knew about this early last year, and so that going back to March of 2019, and that at that time it raised real concerns, particularly among military. Now, that really expands the time frame that we're talking about here, and it not only raises new questions about how it's possible that the president didn't know about this over a course of 15 months or more, and also was likely to increase calls for the president to actually do something about this and explain why he hasn't. So a lot of questions that continue to pile up on this. But Katie, as I said, the White House is sticking to their story that this president did not know about this until essentially it came out last week.
Carol, what do we know right now about the veracity of the intelligence? What have you been hearing?
Well, we know that the White House is saying that the intelligence was not corroborated, that there were some intelligence officials who thought that it was credible, and then there were others that didn't find it credible. And that was what essentially they briefed lawmakers on today when they came to the White House. You heard Steny Hoyer there saying, you know, that essentially some people there were different judgments on the level of credibility, he said, but in his view and the view of others who were there, this was not, as the president had called it, a hoax. So there's some disputes within the administration, according to the White House, about whether the intelligence was credible and whether it was something that should have risen to the level of the president being informed by that.
The White House has said he was not briefed, and the president himself says he has not been briefed. Carol Lee. Yep. Carol, thank you very much. And joining me now is New Jersey Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. She was in this morning's briefing at the White House. Congresswoman Sherrill also served as a Russia policy officer in the U.S. Navy. Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us. What did you learn this morning that you can share with us?
Well, as you said, I was at the White House briefing this morning, and as a former Russian policy officer in the United States Navy, I've had grave concerns. We know Russia has not been a good actor in Afghanistan, and so the reporting that they had offered bounties on the heads of U.S. soldiers was a critical concern of mine, and my sense was that the administration needed to do everything they could to get to the bottom of it. I advocated for that when we were at the briefing this morning. I advocated that they come up with next steps, and really what we asked for there was that the president come out and say, and commit to getting to the bottom of this, and if this is credible, that there are repercussions for the Russians, and to date he's not done that.
Congresswoman, was this an intel briefing done by intelligence officials, or was this a briefing done by White House officials?
It was done mainly by White House officials, mainly by Chief of Staff Meadows. But I think that was part of the problem. We did not hear from the CIA. We did not hear from the NSA, for example, the intelligence gathering agencies. And that is something that those are people that we do need to hear from to understand better the intelligence.
Why would you not be hearing from them immediately?
We have asked for that, and we are getting to the bottom of that right now. And we also said today, and Steny Hoyer repeated this several times during the meeting, that this does not make up for a full briefing of Congress. This was simply the first step.
What do you want to see the president do?
I want to see the president, first and foremost today, come out and say and commit to our troops and the families of our troops that he will do everything in his power to get to the bottom of the reporting that there were bounties put on the heads of American soldiers abroad. I want to hear him commit to that. And I also critically want to hear him commit that if he finds this intelligence credible, that he will then, there will be repercussions for Russia. Because what I think unnerved so many of us is the fact that this reporting was out there, and the president has spoken to Putin reportedly 5 times since March. So he is claiming he had not heard any of this. If that is the case, then he should be very concerned with the intelligence apparatus that he was not briefed on this, even if there are disputed claims that he had not heard this before being on the phone 5 times with President Putin.
Exactly.
Let's talk about that. Disputed claims. Intelligence is murky. Intelligence is never unanimous, or very rarely unanimous, if it ever is. Normally, what is the threshold for what the president learns?
So there's no set threshold because, as you just said, it's murky, it's complicated, it comes from a variety of sources, and not all, the sources aren't always in agreement, and you have to sift through that. I think what our concern is, and what my concern is the fact that with the president's engagement with Russia, he needs to make sure that he is briefed on all the intelligence. So for him to say repeatedly that he had not been briefed on any of this, given that he had been engaged with the President Putin, and given that he's been advocating for Russia to rejoin the G8, this is something that I think should cross his desk. He should be made aware of, and should be ensuring that his intelligence agencies get to the bottom of this.
One last thing. The New York Times is reporting that the alleged Russian bounty is the focus of an investigation into an April 2019 car bombing that killed 3 Marines. Did you hear anything about that this morning?
I can't comment on what we talked about today, but generally that area did not come up.
Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, thank you very much for joining us and giving us a little bit of your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And coming up next, an update from 2 of America's coronavirus hotspots.
Well, there you go. Chaos. And it's kind of like whenever young Bush was leaving his administration there, whenever the 2008 big dunk happened pertaining to the financial market of the real estate market basically crashing. And the president having to come up with $775 billion, just under $1 trillion, to bail out General Motors, Ford, and all these other different people. Bush called this fuzzy math. Fuzzy math, okay? Now we've gone from fuzzy math to murky waters. Should a government that operates for the benefit and the will of the people be operating in the shadows of doubt and indiscretioncies to the point that we do not know who to believe, what to believe, when to believe, or why we should believe? Should any government that holds charge over its people that the people elected, we the people, have such crummy tactics to the point that now we don't know who to believe, why to believe them, when to believe them. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about money issues, or you're talking about NAFTA, or you're talking about free trade, or you're talking about immigrants, or you're talking about us being trillions of dollars in debt, or you're talking about the pandemic, or you're talking about the Ukrainians, or you're talking about now possibly contracts being placed upon our own people. Should the people have to operate a business? And that's exactly what a government is. It's a business. To the degree that we, the people, don't know what is going on upstairs. I thought that we were supposed to be transparent. Even Jesus made claims that he did not call his disciples during the time that he was walking and talking amongst them, because he claimed that his people that followed after him was his friends. And if you are a friend, you are going to not hold back any type of secrets in letting your friends know what you're up to or why you're doing what you're doing. That way, his disciples didn't have to come to him and say, Lord, Lord, this, and Lord, Lord, that. They even asked Jesus a simple question that led into another question. Lord, can we drink of the same cup that you drank of? And the Lord said, absolutely. Bringing himself on an equal level with humanity. And then they asked him another question. Well, if you're going to be sitting on the right hand of the Father, can we sit on the left hand of the Father? And Jesus said, you know not what you ask, for it is not mine to give, but it is of the Father's, which is the Lord. That's the reason why the Father works in secret, and Jesus did not. Should our governments work in mysterious secrets to the point that we do not know verifiably and clarifying whether or not they're burning both candles at the both ends, or rather not they're actually working for we the people, for the benefit of we the people that elected them and put them in power? I mean, you have to start asking yourself a question. Are we being played? And if we are being played, who is playing us? And why are we being played? What have we done to deserve this type of retribution coming from the very people that we have elected and put in power? And I'm just not talking about going to the voting booths and voting. We're talking about a lot of people have sacrificed a great deal of money, time, and put their reputations on the line for a lot of these administrations, regardless whether it be Republican or Democrat or independent. A lot of them have stuck their necks out on the line for these administrations. And for these administrations to be working in such secrecy, especially whenever it comes to the life and death of our own people, you have to start asking yourself the question, has our own government been bought out, sold downstream? Just like what happened during 9/11. To this day, there's still a conspiracy of a group of people that believe that the Bushes and his administration know very well that 9/11 was fixing to occur. because they was monitoring these people from Saudi Arabia. And to this day, they still know that it was Saudi Arabia that masterminded 9/11, even though Saudi Arabia is still in denial about this. They're still covering up the true justice of what had originated during the death of almost 3,000 people. So this nonsense approach, this illegitimate, unjust approach, is now catching up with the American people and with the American politicians, to the point that now we're seeing the true colors right in front of our very eyes of how that they're playing both sides against the middle. I cannot even begin to fathom or believe that our ancestors, who was willing to sacrifice their lives against Britain, against the Revolutionary War that we're fixing to celebrate within the next few days, I cannot begin to fathom that they would be willing to play both sides against the middle. Because at that time, to be caught working against your opposing forces actually meant a punishment of death by being looked upon as being a traitor or a spy to your own people. If there's ever been a time that we needed to pray for unity, we needed to pray for transparency, and we need to pray for justice and fairness, not only about the white race, but the black race and all of the races, it is of today. Because the way this is going, it is not going to have a good ending. And it may just not be a bad ending for the administration that's in power right now, but it may very well be a bad ending for all of us if we do not shape up, and line up. Shalom. And may God have mercy on all of us. And may God bless the United States of America.